Okay, so we're gonna talk about differentiation in the classroom and meeting the needs of every learner. So this is something kind of like the PD that we did the other day about growth mindset. We know what growth mindset is, we know what differentiation is, but how can we take it a step further? So the objectives are to understand what differentiation is and why it matters, explore strategies for differentiating content, process, product, and environment, identifying practical tools and examples, and then collaborating and planning for implementation. So what is differentiation? Could you tell me in your own words without looking at this yet?
Differentiation to me looks different for different staff, depending on what you teach. So for me, I teach visual education, so differentiation for me, depends on what grade level I have and how intense I'm going to get with different skills. And then also too, it also depends on what type of students I have. If I have students that are very athletic, I don't have to go very detailed with them. I don't really have to differentiate. If I have students that are special needs, I'm really gonna have to differentiate on what I'm doing for them so they can also learn the same skills.
Good, so you pretty much hit it on the head with, it looks different in every classroom, every content level, even same grade level in two different classrooms, it looks different. It looks different for every kid as well. So it is tailoring instruction to meet student learning needs, and it's important because it allows to show what they know in different ways. When you think about like taking a test, it may not accurately paint a picture of what the student really knows if they're just guessing. If they didn't sleep last night and they're just guessing, do you know that they just guessed? Not really, because there's nowhere to put like, hey, I'm tired, you know? So, all students have the same learning goal, but instruction is varied based on their interests, preferences, strengths, and needs. And it's proactive, qualitative, and student-centered, but it is not individualized instruction or chaotic. Some people might go into a classroom and then everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and they might think, oh, that's a really crazy classroom. But then whenever you actually get into it and go from, group to group, and you're hearing like these kids are having productive conversations, no matter where you go in the room. So why differentiate? Kind of like you said earlier, every student has diverse needs, their abilities, learning styles, interests, readiness, and then especially for us and our school and who we serve, their background knowledge is all different. And then it promotes equity and access and supports student engagement and success. And so for the activity, we're gonna talk about what differences you encounter in your classroom.
Cool.
Talk with your neighbor.
So, this is what I do in my classroom. So in my classroom, one thing that I do, is I actually do a lot of like turn and talk to your neighbor about different things. I do think peer care sometimes. And then there just are differences because, obviously I don't teach in the standard setting. So I don't have like desks and stuff. I don't have paper, I don't have pens. So a lot of my things are gonna be verbal. It's also gonna be a lot of listening as well.
And so in my classroom, differences that I encounter are, I guess, like family backgrounds. And so one student might have a mom, dad, and siblings, whereas another, they might just have grandma at home.
Mhm.
And so that also impacts like what their needs are in the classroom, and even like what their, maybe the emotions that are tied to different. So if you're doing a, ELA story and it has a mom and a dad and everything else, and they're talking about a family, then that student might be checked out because of their emotions.
Good one.
Okay, so 4 key areas of differentiation are content, which is what the student learns. And then process, how the student makes sense of the material. Product is how they show what they've learned. And then the learning environment is like the climate and arrangement of the classroom. So I have this paper, it's another activity, and
Got
it's
it.
divided into 4 parts. And so I would like you to write how you're differentiating in those. And it can be activity to activity, because
Got it.
you might do different.
Oscar, the custodian, I need you to report to the kinder area right now. Oscar, the custodian, I need you to report to the kinder area right now.
Okay, so now we're just gonna talk kind of like about each one. So what did you say about content? Like what students learn? How's that happening?
So I ended up picking something that I teach to our kids, which is like how to throw a ball. So it may sound simple, but there's a lot of things that go into it. For one thing, you've got to have some kind of basic athleticism, and then you've got to have some kind of knowledge of like what body parts you're using, and you've also got to cross the midline, which we know is difficult for a lot of our kids. So then that's one thing that I do. But then as a product, how they show what they've learned, we practice hitting different things. We may throw into a hula hoop, we may throw to a target, we may throw to a partner. But as far as that process goes, we may play different games, different activities to get there, and I can evaluate them as we go along and see how they're progressing. And then for our learning environment, it's a positive learning environment. It's kind of like the Planet Fitness motto where there's no judgment. Because I don't want any kid to feel like they're being made fun of.
So with the learning environment, do you have all the kids stand around the gym and watch the one kid throw it in, or do you have them working on like smaller groups for that activity?
So I never have one kid working by themselves. I've usually got 12 to 16 kids working at a time. So there's no kid that's ever being singled out, like just to throw by themselves, for instance.
So mine are kind of similar, like in the classroom. Um, so content with that, I mean, like the TEKs are obviously what drives, but like the resources might be accommodations or like supplemental aids. And then the process, I feel like every kid is gonna like make sense of it differently based on all those things that we talked about. Product, for me, it would be how they show that they know something. So if it's gonna be like presentation or an
Mhm.
essay, or if they do like a PowerPoint. Oh, I said presentation. But yeah. And then for the classroom, the learning environment might look different because if they're working in groups, I'm not gonna have individual desks. So differentiating content, that's like using different reading materials at varied levels. And so we might all read the same passage, but I'm not gonna have this student reading on the same level as this student. And then even like if this kid's into animals and this kid's into cars,
Mhm.
then they can read, what's on their level, but they might be learning about two different things if I'm wanting them to, if I'm focusing on a certain skill. Offer audio and visual versions of text, and then provide choices and topics. So yeah. Using tiered passages about the same science concept. And then differentiating the process, like flexible grouping. So like you might pair, if you have students who have special needs, you might pair them with someone who can like help them along the way.
Mhm.
Or you might do, with the kids who know how to do all those things and then make a, more intricate game to challenge them, while these other students might just be throwing it into the hula hoop. Learning in centers or stations. I've seen that in your classroom, your gym, and
Mhm.
they kind of go all to different things. And then graphic organizers, scaffolding, visuals, guided questions, sentence. Differentiating products is student choices, posters, essays, skits, podcasts, presentations. You could do for the activity for this one, I may have missed the last. That's okay. Um, just kind of either go on the back of your paper or just use one square and think about how you could differentiate the product in PE by creating a choice board. Like, you think you could do this?
All right, I've got two different things.
I'm not gonna ask you to share this. You can keep it in your room.
That's it.
Differentiating learning or differentiating the learning environment, like I said. Seating arrangements for collaborative or independent work, lighting, noise, like may want to do music, or if you're, trying to get the kids to read and stuff, probably turning off the lights isn't the best solution to that. And then, like you said earlier, you said a safe environment to take risks. And so that's important too. Like we think of, a classroom and how it's set up, but how are we allowing students to take risks and respecting that? And so if a kid, says an answer who doesn't always answer and the kids make fun of them, they're probably not going to do that again. So learning about your students is very important. We always talk about relationships, and so it's like, how do you do that? Readiness, use data to assess readiness. This is a continuous process that never ends, and it may differ from unit to unit. And so you might do throwing and the kid's really good at it, but the next thing that you do, they might need some help. And then interest. So what are the kids like interested in? You can do like a quick little survey. For them to build relationships and get buy-in, because if a kid's not really interested in basketball, they're probably just gonna go sit down or mess with their friends. Same thing for classroom. Learning profiles to understand the student and how they learn. So they might be a kid who learns by doing stuff project-based or just listening. I'm not that. I like to get up and move. Tools and technology to support differentiation. For formative assessments, then there's Kahoot, Quiz, all these different things. Content platforms, we have our curriculum, Epic, different stuff like that. And then classroom management is like Google Classroom, Seesaw, and a lot of other resources. Google Classroom can also be a good place to put like student surveys where, like we talked on the last slide, to just to get to know our kids and see how you can differentiate or make connections. Because they might see and be like, oh, you know what, I filled that out. Miss Stanton listened and she knows I like cars. And so I feel really good that she gave me a car article to read. Differentiation can be very overwhelming, so start small. You might be really comfortable with a certain unit and just take one part or one group of kids that you work with and kind of try to integrate it more. Use existing curriculum. I know in special education, this is a hot topic because there's not always modified curriculum for us. And so we have to take what we have. It's just kind of like another step, but and then collaborate with peers. You have a lot of good teachers around you that can help you. And also your administrators are great. All right, so now we're going to plan a lesson that has differentiation in all four of those areas. So take something that you're not so familiar with and then make a plan for that lesson. You were really good earlier. You already did the lesson. That was probably a good way to like tackle that. So this one we are gonna share. So do you wanna go first or do you want me to go first?
I can go first. So you were saying to pick an area of content potentially that we're not really comfortable with. So I decided to go with volleyball and volleyball skills, because that's not something I ever played or that I'm really familiar with. But I did develop kind of a small plan of what to do. And basically, we're gonna be taking it very slow, we're gonna be breaking it down skill by skill and why we do each skill. And we'll be doing a lot of independent practice and a lot of practice with a partner before we ever get to a net. That way, no kid is ever singled out with them just, doing anything by themselves. And then we're gonna keep that same positive learning environment too, that way kids actually want to learn because it's a lifelong activity that they can do. Their entire life.
I like too, there's one like thing that, I guess activity that you did. And you just took it a step further by putting, it was like the parachute, and instead of using a ball, you use like the squeaking chicken or pig. or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm like, those are things that you're doing that are differentiating, just to make things fun and, exciting for the students. That's something they're gonna remember and probably go home and be like, oh,
I remember.
coach.
that.
Yeah, it was a lot
That
of
was
fun,
fun.
even for adults, but like that
Mm,
also encourages the relationship and everybody having fun.
Right, exactly.
So the content that I chose was mental images, and I think I would use I guess like different charts for students to chart that on, because they might see it different in their head on, what goes into that. So for the process, kind of like you like pumping it, thinking about what skills you have to have before that, and then taking it a step further each time. And then for product, I made a choice board of 4 choices. And so one's like taking a picture, like picture and write. And then passage, like just writing, and then a video. So like maybe them explaining, closing their eyes and then explaining what they see to make that mental image. And then a presentation. And then for the learning environment, making it a safe environment, but also for this, I would like to do like whatever choice that they chose, then putting them in similar groups. And so like the people who took a picture or gonna take a picture and write, then they're in the same group, kind of working on that together. So potential challenges, things that teachers are probably gonna say to, because it is hard. Teachers have a lot on their plates, and then it's like, this is just adding one more thing. So time could be, you only have 5 days to do this lesson. How am I gonna differentiate the product and let these kids do all these different things? Start with one group or one activity. And then chaos, kind of like I talked about earlier, if somebody comes in, it's like, oh, your classroom's so loud, or, like what's happening in that classroom down there? They're always loud. Just making sure that you have things planned out and your materials planned out will make it go a lot smoother. Say like this group's doing the picture, I'll probably make sure to have a little Intax little camera there. Or this other group, if they're doing a presentation, probably have computers or an iPad at that desk. And then having structure, so like making sure the students understand their knowledge. And then easy work, you might think that one thing is easy and that's why the kid is choosing it. Just make sure that it's meaningful and respectful, and so kind of like we were talking about, making it a safe environment for them to take risks. If you're like, oh, you just wanted the easy option, that's not doing those things. That's not supporting what you're trying to instill in the students. And then grading could be hard if you have all these different products, but trying to make a rubric to where it's like, okay, the kid met these things. Or like a 1, 2, 3, 4. I missed something. Yeah. So support or professional development, follow-ups. So after this, you say, you have that plan, not that you have to stick to it, but we could further discuss like, okay, how are we gonna differentiate? And then me come in your room, not to judge you or anything like that, but see how I can support you. And then there's a book called The Differentiator Classroom by Carol Tomlinson, and then various websites. So now we're going to talk about how we can reflect and what action steps we're going to try for the year. So there's a blue one, which is what's one thing you will try. Yellow is what support do you need. I can say that, me going in there, all is great and fine and dandy. But if I actually don't go in there, there should be accountability. Or me going in there might not be the support that you need. And then pink is how you will measure student response. So how do you know that it's working with kids to have engagement and meaningful? Thank you for that signal. All right. Thumbs up. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Well, I think we're good. I enjoyed the discussion about differentiation, how we can use them.
Thank you. I hope that helps.